some of the brightest minds make the darkest choices, not because they don't know better, but because knowing more doesn't always mean seeing clearly. Intelligence can illuminate, yet the same intelligence can quietly narrow perspective. It sharpens thought while adding a soft layer of doubt that often slips by unnoticed. The smartest minds create their own traps, carefully built structures formed from reasons that feel unbreakable. Sometimes the mind that solves complex equations struggles to recognize the simple truth resting quietly inside its own chest. Before the experiment began, the room appeared completely ordinary. Papers on desks, soft voices drifting between students, nothing that seemed significant. But a slight change in wording shifted everything that followed. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky presented two versions of the same choice to two groups of highly educated students. The numbers were identical, the outcome unchanged, yet the framing reshaped their decisions. When the result appeared as a gain, the brightest students leaned toward caution. When framed as a loss, those same minds became unexpectedly bold. Nothing in the math changed, but the internal response did. The decision wasn't fully rational, even though it felt steady in the moment it was made. Emotion stepped forward first, and logic followed afterward to support what was already chosen. History reflects a similar pattern. In the final months of World War II, skilled Allied analysts predicted that Germany would resist street by street until the end. Their models aligned, their reasoning consistent, every calculation pointing the same way. Yet the war collapsed almost overnight. Emotion among the population, exhaustion and hopelessness, not intelligence, determined the outcome. Even nations can slip into irrational choices when they trust their models more than the human minds interpreting them. Intelligence shapes our thinking, while emotion quietly guides direction, and the two can drift apart without being noticed. A brilliant mind can fall into gentle traps, not because it is fragile, but because its strength creates patterns it forgets to question. Intelligence acts like a magnifying glass, expanding each detail and every imagined scenario until the future feels heavier than it is. A simple choice turns into a maze, filled with questions about direction, capacity, uncertainty, and the pressure between them. Should I take the job? And what if the city slowly drains me? What if the company struggles? Or what if I misread what I can handle? An intelligent mind imagines 1,000 futures and often becomes tangled inside the ones it creates. The irony is quiet and steady. The ability to think deeply can gently dissolve clarity at the very moment clarity is needed. Options multiply, and certainty softens as the mind keeps searching. Smart people grow used to understanding things quietly and almost effortlessly, and this familiarity creates a subtle mirage that feels like correctness. It whispers that careful thinking must mean the answer is sound, but the sharper the mind becomes, the more refined its justifications grow. It doesn't admit bias directly. Instead, it gathers reasons that appear consistent and balanced. Brilliant minds don't outrun bias. They shape it until it resembles understanding. Emotions don't vanish with intelligence. They simply change form. A sense of fear becomes strategy. Desire reshapes itself as logic, and avoidance hides behind timing. The mind writes rational stories to protect emotions it doesn't want to name. Someone may stay in a collapsing relationship because loyalty feels like the explanation, or remain in a draining job because leaving feels too close to failing. intelligence hides emotion more elegantly, not less. In 2002, Yale researchers studied the illusion of explanatory depth by asking people to explain simple, everyday mechanisms. Locks, zippers, and familiar devices felt easy to understand, yet confidence faded when deeper detail was required. Familiarity pretended to be understanding, and recognition played the role of mastery. Knowledge often feels like certainty, but that certainty is only a feeling, not a measure of clarity. Some prodigies lose their way not from thinking too little, but from thinking too much. They search for elegance in every angle and miss the simple threat standing quietly nearby. Complexity can obscure perception as easily as lack of knowledge. Analysts understand more than most, yet many hesitate when investing their own money. Too many variables rise, too many futures take shape, and too many imagined failures hold them still. Knowledge becomes hesitation, and hesitation becomes irrationality. Historians see cycles everywhere, patterns that seem to repeat and echoes that appear familiar. But comfort in the past can distort the view of the present and soften awareness of what is new. At the center of many irrational decisions lies a sense of identity quietly woven into the choice. Smart people defend their decisions not because the decision is strong, but because changing it feels like changing themselves. The mind protects that inner story even when the story carries weight that subtly shapes behavior. It is rarely the argument someone holds on to. It is the identity beneath it that keeps the grip in place. Logic lives at a distance, while life unfolds up close in ways the mind cannot fully oversee. An intelligent mind rises above the landscape, mapping patterns, weighing risks, and tracing possible outcomes with care. But the heart remains inside that same landscape, feeling the terrain directly in a way no model can fully capture. When intelligence climbs too high, it drifts away from the ground it was meant to guide with clarity. The mind observes the world around it, yet avoids observing itself, holding outer understanding while softening its inner awareness. External signals stay sharp, but internal cues blur and the landscape becomes vast, beautiful, endless, and quietly disorienting. Two gentle practices can bring the mind back to steadier ground. Pause for a moment, take one slow breath, then ask, what emotion is guiding me right now? Naming the emotion reveals the disguise it used, turning a shadow into something clear and grounded enough to approach directly. If your reasoning expands into paragraphs, the simple truth is hiding beneath it. Reduce the thought to one honest sentence. I want to leave because I feel trapped. I'm avoiding this because I fear rejection. I'm staying because the unknown unsettles me. A single sentence brings clarity, cuts through the spiral, and guides you back to a steadier inner place. Intelligence is not a compass. It behaves more like light that can reveal or quietly mislead depending on where it falls. A sharp mind can map every possibility yet lose connection with the ground that gives those possibilities meaning. Wisdom begins when intelligence turns inward and emotion becomes a signal rather than something to resist. When the self is met with understanding rather than protection, the mind becomes steady enough for simplicity to reappear. Perhaps the real decision is not the option you select, but the inner position that quietly guides the direction you take.